My name is Malcolm Gladwell. I'm a writer. I have a podcast called Revisionist History. I write books. I write for The New Yorker. So Sugo is a nonprofit that was started by a very old friend of mine named Malagaynkar. And she is originally from India and has had a long-standing interest in developmental issues. But she's a wonk. She's not a traditional nonprofit person. She's like a finance type who's highly analytical and incredibly intellectually curious. And the question she asked was, is there something that a very small, focused, highly analytical group can do to make the work of the larger organizations better, solve discrete problems for them? And that was really, that's how she started. She's just looking for interesting problems that Sugo can come up with useful answers to. And she was, in the beginning, totally open to what the problems were, how to approach them, just with the only thing that she had in the back of her mind was that it was going to be wonky. It's going to be like, we're going to use every analytical tool that we can find. And she found Sema, and Sema and Mala are like, they're the two nonprofit superheroes in my book. They like fly around the world and solve problems. So I'm here at Devex World in Washington, my first visit, because I wanted to introduce Sema to this world, to the people who don't know her already, and have her talk a little bit about what Sugo does and what makes Sugo interesting. And we only have 20 minutes, so there's a limit to how much we can talk about. But I think what we want to I want to try and get someone to talk a little bit about what is special about Sugo's perspective, and then I think we're going to try and get into one of the case studies, which is the work they've been doing on child and maternal mortality in UP in India. Well, I think one of the ideas that Sugo is exploring is what can we learn from private sector approaches to customer psychology and import that into the nonprofit world, into the development world. And I don't think we definitively have an answer. Do we know for sure that the private sector is more sophisticated? I don't know if we know that. But we think it's a very useful question to ask. And if we approach the recipient of developmental attention the way that companies approach their customers, does that help us? Does that give us an insight we wouldn't have had before? That's really the question that we're exploring. And that means a number of things, but it's a shift from focusing on what people do and then towards why. And why is a whole lot more complicated than what. And it's also a key part of that is situating people in the systems and environments in which they operate. And trying to locate people within their sort of within their circumstances in a more sophisticated way. I had been involved with nonprofits before, but in much more traditional areas. Like I've been and worked for many years in one that does, education work in disadvantaged neighborhoods. So that's the most kind of familiar domestic. My familiarity with stuff that's going on overseas in much more complex environments is limited. So I come here, I'm not coming here to inform anyone about anything. I'm coming here really with my eyes and ears open to kind of learn stuff. But do I have any things in particular? No, I'm always interested in people, in attempts to apply psychological principles to new complex environments. I just think that's an endless source of fascination and for me. So one of the, coming from the private sector perspective, the great revolution in consumer marketing of the last 25 years was the notion of market segmentation, was an understanding that there may be a very wide variety of motivations within what seems like a monolithic customer group. If you're selling cars, if you're selling Chevys, you think, oh, these are my Chevy customers. But you may be blind to the idea that there may be 5 or 6 very distinct reasons why someone would buy a Chevy. And then there may also be 5 or 6 very distinct reasons or ways in which to reach a Chevy buying family. You know, the difference between a family where the teenage son is driving the decision and a family where the grandfather's driving the decision and then the family where the wife is driving the decision is enormous, right? Whole different. So that kind of took an awful long time for consumer marketing on the for-profit side to appreciate that the level of variation in individual motivation. And I think what Sugo is trying to do is to bring that same kind of finely grained sophistication about variation in motivations to bear on some of the most impoverished areas of the world. You know, we're not, you know, what if we think about the mother in a village in rural India with the same kind of sophistication as we think about the upper middle class Chevy buyer in, you know, in the suburbs of New York. You know, is there some kind of way in which one discipline can inform another?